Some cities die with screams. Port Three Nose was the kind that died watching itself bleed in silence. The orbital lights above flickered through the artificial dusk, casting cold shadows across the refugee station. Makeshift tents of thermal mesh rustled faintly beneath the low hum of environmental regulators. The illusion of weather, light synthetic rain, slid in patterned drops down the curved dome above, mimicking storms on a planet no one remembered fondly. A place left burning behind evacuation vectors. Oscar moved through it all like a ghost with a heartbeat. His boots struck the grid floor with practiced rhythm, stepping over coiled power cables and discarded ration sleeves. A medical satchel bounced softly at his hip, mismatched patches sewn over where the Earth insignia used to be. He hadn't worn that emblem in years, and even now, without it, he still felt its weight like a scar under the skin. His hand held a thermal scanner, the interface cracked but functional. Most of the camp was asleep or pretending to be. Curfew quieted things. That was the rule. If you wanted to be ignored, be still. A cluster of heat signatures caught his eye. Small, low to the ground, too close to the medbay entrance. He slowed, frowned. 3 figures. 1 adult. 2 smaller, pressed in her sides. Not listed. Not scanned at intake. Not supposed to be here. Oscar stepped closer. The rain simulation pattered gently overhead, distant as memory. The first thing he noticed was the woman's stillness. She knelt in silence, back bent under the weight of a rain-soaked violet shawl. It clung to her narrow shoulders like morning silk, draping over the 2 children tucked against her, small bodies curled like seedlings in frost. She didn't look up, even when his boots stopped a meter away. They always looked up, even the broken ones. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice low, almost hesitant. "This area is restricted, especially after curfew." No answer, just the sound of one child breathing too shallowly, too quickly. The smaller of the 2 twitched slightly in his sleep, as if swatting away nightmares. Oscar knelt, his knees cracked audibly. That usually startled people. She didn't flinch. The light caught her face beneath the veil's edge, skin the color of storm cloud violets, luminescent in the cold glow. Her cheekbones were sharp, lips pale, eyes half hidden behind long white lashes. Beneath her, one child had hair the same silver white as her own, the girl's face streaked with grime, and Oscar realized with a twist in his gut, frostburn. They've been outside too long. "You'll freeze out here," he said. The woman's lips moved, but the words were soft, shaped more by breath than voice. He leaned in. "They said I'm worthless without a male." The sentence settled like ash on the back of his tongue. Her accent was melodic, a holdover from a culture that once held court among stars. Not anymore. The Yuzian people had been nobility once, before the collapse, before the camps, before surviving became an act of quiet defiance. "I could be a good wife," she said. "Please. My children need you. Human." He didn't answer. Couldn't really. Because it wasn't a proposition. It wasn't manipulation. It was surrender, offered like rations, divided 3 ways. Oscar's mouth was dry. Last time he'd heard a voice that hollow, he'd been pulling a child out of a collapsed corridor on Telmach Prime, blood already cooling in his palms. He defied orders that day, thrown away his career. And in the end, the kid hadn't made it. No medal, no pardon, just guilt with long claws. He exhaled slowly, chest tight. "I have soup," he said, "and thermal blankets." Inside, she didn't move, just looked at her children, as if they were the only reason she'd survived this long. "I'm not promising anything," he added. Still nothing. So he moved first. He unclipped the fastener on his jacket and peeled off the inner lining, a heat-trapping field wrap, lined with old emergency foil. As he draped it over the children, his fingers brushed against hers. She flinched. Barely, but it was there. A taut ripple under the skin. Not from fear. From memory, maybe. From the echo of all the times that touch had meant pain. He didn't withdraw. He just made sure the boy's face was covered and stood again. The medical tent was still warm from earlier triage rotation. A low heat lamp cast a dull, orange glow across the cots and cabinets. He cleared a bench, reset the recycler, and poured broth into 3 chipped ceramic mugs. The children stirred as the warmth hit them. The girl sat up first, blinking. Her eyes were silver pale, wide-set, and far too tired for her size. She clutched something. Oscar squinted, a cloth doll, nearly colorless from wear. She didn't speak. The boy was slower. He whimpered softly as his mother sat him down and curled into her side with a low hiccup. Oscar handed over the first mug. The girl took it in both hands. Then the boy. Their small, violet fingers trembled. He hesitated before offering the last one to the mother. Her gaze met his now for the first time. There was nothing in her eyes. Not fear, not hope, just the hollow weight of someone who had already used the last of their dignity just to reach this tent. "Drink," he said gently. "You'll need your strength." She took it. It wasn't a victory. It was a pause. She brought the mug to her lips, but didn't sip. Just let the heat warm her fingers, as if afraid the taste would wake her from something. The girl stared at Oscar, unblinking. Then, soft as breath, she spoke. "Duh." The syllable landed like a pulse against his spine. Her mother stiffened. "She doesn't know what she's saying," she said quickly, mortified. "I didn't teach her that." Oscar looked at the girl, then back at her mother. "It's all right," he said. He didn't know if it was, but it felt like the only thing to say. He laid a cot with clean linen, motioning them to rest. The children lay down immediately, exhausted. The woman stood, watching, still unsure if this was safe or just a different kind of trap. "You can sleep here tonight," he said. She shook her head. "I'll stay by the door. There's room." "I shouldn't." He didn't argue. He just placed a folded blanket on the floor near the cot and left a rehydrated tea capsule by the bench. She didn't touch it, but 20 minutes later, the cup was empty. He lay back on his own cot, listening to the subtle breath patterns of the tent. Children sleeping, woman unmoving, rain echoing on synthetic domes above. He closed his eyes. The last time he'd felt this kind of silence, he'd been lying in a crater, holding his breath while enemy gunships passed overhead. That was a silence of survival. This was something else. Maybe the beginning of something worth surviving for. He didn't know the woman's name. She hadn't offered it. But in his mind, he gave her one. Silent Flame. And when he finally let sleep take him, it wasn't the dread that followed him into dreams. It was the echo of a child's voice, soft and misplaced, calling him something he'd sworn he'd never be again. Duh. And for the first time in a long time, Oscar didn't feel like he had to run from the sound. He just listened and let live. Oscar woke to the low hum of the medbay's air filtration system, his senses sharpening before his eyes even opened. The artificial rain outside the dome had stopped hours ago, replaced by the mechanical murmur of morning cycles beginning across Port Threnos. He lay still for a moment, listening, training his ear like he used to on recon patrols, not for enemies, but for the fragile sounds of presence. The children were breathing in their sleep, light, even. The mother, still unnamed in his mind except as Silent Flame, sat not far from them, wrapped in the thermal blanket he'd left her. She hadn't used the cot, but she'd moved closer to the children during the night. A sign of trust? Maybe. Or just fatigue, overcoming fear. Oscar sat up slowly, the ache in his spine a reminder that this cot, like everything else in the refugee station, wasn't designed for comfort. He rubbed the back of his neck, then stood and stretched. The moment he moved, she looked up. Her posture was rigid, as if she expected to be scolded just for existing in the space. "You sleep at all?" he asked quietly, keeping his tone neutral. She shook her head once, not with defiance, more like apology. The girl stirred. Her eyes opened and landed on Oscar. She blinked slowly, then pushed her doll toward her mother and whispered something in the Yuzian dialect, soft and childlike, yet oddly lyrical. He caught only fragments. Enough to guess it meant something close to, "Is the human still here?" The boy woke next, whimpering, reaching blindly until he felt his sister's hand. Then he calmed. Oscar watched them, his jaw tightening slightly as the scene pulled something raw from deep within. He moved to the warming unit, reheated a sealed protein pack, and poured 3 small portions of broth. He set 2 cups on the floor near the children, crouching to offer a third to their mother. I'll see about real food later, he said. This'll help for now. She hesitated again before accepting it, fingers brushing his briefly. She didn't flinch this time, but she didn't meet his eyes either. He took a seat near the tent's entrance, watching them as they ate. The girl drank too fast and coughed, and her mother reached over instinctively, placing a slender hand on her back. They were quiet, trained by necessity, every movement economical, every gesture meant to conserve warmth, energy, and space. Oscar had seen soldiers with less discipline. He exhaled slowly. I need names. The woman froze, spoon halfway to her lips. For the record, he added, not for command. She studied him, still uncertain. But she set her spoon down. Tila, she said softly, nodding toward the girl. The child looked up and gave the faintest of smiles. It vanished quickly, as if afraid to stay. And him, Nario, she murmured. Oscar nodded. Yours. She didn't answer. He let it go. The camp outside was beginning to stir. Oscar could hear the clatter of carts being dragged across the mesh walks, the grumble of overworked generators kicking into their daytime rhythm. Across the compound, ration lines would already be forming. Families huddled in clusters, waiting for half-warm packets and nutrient gels. I'll need to log them temporarily, Oscar said, standing. No one scanned them in. If an inspector sees you 3 without tags, you'll be processed. Or worse. Her voice was quiet, but steady. We were smuggled in. That made him pause. Ow! She didn't elaborate, but her gaze dropped briefly to the floor, ashamed, maybe, or simply tired of explaining things no one wanted to hear. Oscar looked at the children. Tila clutched the cloth doll again. Nario sat pressed into her side, the edge of Oscar's thermal wrap draped over his knees. He remembered something. A flash. Telma Prime. A collapsed underpass. A child's arm, limp and cold in his grasp. The moment he stopped obeying orders and started saving lives. The moment everything changed. And still, somehow, he hadn't expected this. I'll get you temporary IDs, he said. No scans. No names in the central registry. Just a clearance code so no one pulls you out of line. She looked at him then, just for a second. Her eyes were soft violet, rimmed with the raw pink of wind-chafed skin. But there was something behind them. Recognition. Not trust. Not yet. But recognition. He turned away and stepped into the outer corridor, tapping his communicator against the wall console. The system flickered, slow today. He tapped again, fingers impatient. It finally connected to the medbay network. The override code still worked. He printed 3 low-level wristbands. Non-invasive. No biometric sync. He walked back inside and crouched again. Wrist, he said, showing her. Just for appearances. She looked at the band like it might bite her. Then offered her arm. He clipped it gently. Then the children. Nario cried softly until Oscar whispered something. Nonsense words, really, but quiet, steady. The boy stared at him. Then hiccuped. Then stopped crying. Oscar stood. You're safe in here. For now. He turned to go, but her voice caught him. Why? He looked back. Why what? Why help us? Oscar considered his answer. Too many words came to mind. None of them simple. None of them honest without bleeding. I was told once that helping the wrong people can ruin your life, he said, voice quiet. They weren't wrong, but they also weren't right. She nodded slowly, as if that made perfect sense. He started for the door again. Your name, she said. He paused. Turned back. Oscar. A breath passed between them. Thank you, Oscar. She still didn't give her name. That was fine. He hadn't earned it yet. Outside, the station lights brightened by 2 degrees. Morning, as much as this place could offer. He pulled his jacket tighter, stepped into the corridor, and faded into the crowd. Just another medic with too many ghosts and not enough gloves. But somewhere behind him, in a warm tent near the medbay wall, 2 violet-skinned children ate hot food for the 2nd morning in a row. And a woman who'd been told she was worthless without a man had chosen to stay another night under his roof. And that, in this place, was a kind of miracle. A quiet one, but no less real. The 3rd cycle came with a heavy stillness. Not a storm, not even silence. Just that peculiar kind of inertia that hangs in the air when too many people are trying not to hope. Oscar stepped through the outer corridor of the med bay, shrugging off his jacket with one hand while balancing a thermal tray in the other. He'd scavenged 2 extra protein sachets from the auxiliary rations desk. Not legal, not flagged either, just tucked under a clipboard, taken when no one was looking too hard. It wasn't charity, it was preservation. Inside the tent, the recycled air was warmer than expected. Someone must have adjusted the thermal intake. A tiny act, almost invisible, but it meant someone had started to believe they'd be here tomorrow too. The children were awake. Tila sat cross-legged on the floor, the dull blue glow of the penlight pressed beneath a sheet of plast paper. She was drawing again, something shapeless and shifting, all curves and circles and stars that didn't belong to this system. Nerio lay curled beside her, awake but silent, blinking slowly as if the world was too large for him to process in one breath. Sarai sat near the back wall, hair undone, a pale waterfall spilling down over one shoulder. She wasn't watching her children. She was watching him, always alert, always braced. Oscar crossed the room quietly and placed the tray on his center crate. "Not much," he said, keeping his tone light. "But it's warm, and it doesn't taste like solvent, which is more than I can say for yesterday's meal." Tila looked up, nose wrinkling. It smelled like burned wires. Oscar smiled. "That's because it was." Nerio giggled softly at his sister's reaction, then tugged at the blanket around his waist. He still didn't speak, but he looked at Oscar with something closer to comfort now. Familiarity, even. That was progress. Sarai stood slowly and crossed to the tray, graceful in every movement, like someone used to being watched and judged for how she took each step. Her fingers brushed the edge of the cup before lifting it. She didn't thank him, not verbally, but her nod was deeper today, less obligatory, more real. Oscar watched her for a moment, the way the light outlined the high bones of her cheeks, the faint shimmer of violet undertone beneath her skin. The longer he was around her, the more he noticed the little things, the precise way she folded cloth, the way she never ate until the children had finished, the way she always kept one eye on the door. Like a creature raised in the wild. Graceful, tense, waiting. "You can relax, you know," he said, leaning back on the cot. She looked at him flatly. "Can I? No scanners come through here without my clearance. You're safe. For now." "For now" is always a promise broken. The words hung between them. She didn't say them like an accusation, more like a prophecy she'd seen fulfilled too many times to doubt. Oscar didn't argue. Instead, he leaned forward and opened his second packet. "You like sweet root?" "I haven't tasted it in over a cycle," she said. "I found a few dried strips, probably smuggled from Earth or one of the trade colonies. Not ration legal. You risked consequences for flavor." "For children," he said. "Flavor is how they know they're still alive." She blinked at that, just once, then reached for the dried strip and broke off a piece, offering it first to Tila, then to Nerio. Oscar watched their reactions, the girl chewing quickly, eyes wide, the boy licking it like it might vanish. He made a soft sound of surprise, then clung to it tightly like he didn't trust the moment to last. Oscar's chest tightened, not in pain, just in recognition. "They don't beg," he said softly. "No," Sarai said. "They learn not to. Those who beg get remembered, and remembered ones disappear." He looked up sharply. "You said you were part of House Meek-Harith." "I was." "What happened to the others?" "They're bones now, or scattered dust in the transport fields. My husband among them, my brother, my aunt, all marked as sympathizers. And you?" I hid. Her tone didn't waver, but Oscar saw the slight shift in her hands, the way her knuckles pressed tighter around the mug. "They said I could trade the children for status," she added, so quietly he barely caught it. "Yuzian law permits it. A mother with nothing is not considered a citizen. But a highborn child, especially a girl, is valuable. They offer me food, a thermal cell, a place, and you refused." Her eyes lifted to his. "There are worse deaths than starvation, Oscar." The way she said his name still surprised him, like she hadn't quite decided whether to speak it gently or spit it like a defense. He nodded slowly. "Yeah, there are. Tila tugged at his sleeve then, breaking the tension with the sudden confidence of someone who had forgotten she was afraid. She held up the plas sheet. On it was a crude image, a tall figure with short dark hair, two small ones beside him, and a third, taller, with long white hair, standing slightly behind. The stars above them were drawn like upside-down tears. "She says that's you," Sarai said quietly. Oscar took the sheet. "I look taller in this." Tila giggled. "Are those tears or stars?" he asked her. She hesitated, then said, very quietly, "Both." Oscar looked up. The girl's eyes were calm, steady, not innocent. No child here was, but there was something else behind them. Trust, maybe. The seed of it. He folded the drawing and tucked it into his jacket. Sarai watched him do it and said nothing. Later, after the children had settled into their sleep mats again, Oscar stood and moved toward the makeshift wash basin. The water line sputtered, then ran clear. "You should sleep," Sarai said. "I'm on night watch again in 3 hours. You haven't slept much." "I never do." She moved quietly to his side, not close enough to touch, but close enough to be felt. Her voice dropped low, nearly a whisper. "You carry too much." "I know. You shouldn't have to." He turned to face her. "I'm human. We're made to carry things." "That's what they told us," she said, "before the burning began. That humans were blunt but useful. Durable. Like ship plating. You take damage, but you keep flying. Not sure if that's a compliment." "It is. At least from someone who's still breathing." They looked at each other for a long, wordless moment. Then Sarai did something unexpected. She reached out and adjusted the collar of his jacket, fingers brushing against his neck. It was brief, subtle, but deliberate, and Oscar didn't move. He just breathed. For once, the med bay didn't feel like a makeshift graveyard. It felt lived in, alive. He didn't say thank you. She didn't ask him to. When he finally lay down, he watched the ceiling coils dim to their lowest setting. And when he closed his eyes, he didn't fall into the usual weightless, dreamless fatigue. He dreamed of starlight, and of a girl drawing galaxies out of grief, and of a woman with violet skin who had stopped watching the door and started watching him. Oscar hadn't meant to stay late. He told himself it would just be for a few minutes, to check vitals, refill the water cache, maybe coax Nario to eat a little more. But somehow, night had fallen again, and he was still sitting on the floor of the med bay, his back against the reinforced crate that held the camp's meager supply of gauze rolls and injectable coagulants. Tila was asleep with her head in Sarai's lap, her white hair spilling across her mother's robe like spilled light. Nario, curled beside them, clung to the hem of his sister's tunic, fingers twitching faintly as he dreamed. Sarai gently ran her hand through her daughter's hair, movements slow, methodical, endlessly careful. "You always sit like that when you think," she said, voice soft enough not to disturb the children. "With your back to the wall. Feet forward. Hands open." Oscar glanced over, eyebrows raised. "And here I thought I was subtle. You're not." He let out a breath, not quite a laugh. "You're watching me that closely? I watch everyone that closely. It's the only reason I'm still alive." She didn't say it like a boast, just a fact, the same way she spoke about food or weather or war. Oscar leaned his head back against the wall. The dimmed lights cast faint halos across the ceiling, filtering through the heating vents in a low hum. Outside, Port Threenos was quiet again, too quiet for safety, but just enough for reflection. "Ask it," Sarai said after a moment. He looked at her. "You've been wanting to ask me since the day we met," she added. "About how we got here. About what happened before. I figured you'd tell me when you were ready." "I'm not, but I'll do it anyway." Oscar sat forward slightly, shifting his weight. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. Sarai took a deep breath. "After my husband was executed, I was marked. Not by law, by something worse. By silence. His name was Aaron. He'd serve as a high advisor in the Accord, mostly diplomatic liaison with outer colonies. They accused him of aiding rebels. They said he passed messages to human sympathizers. Did he? He passed messages, she said, her tone unreadable. But not to rebels. He passed them to his mother, who lived 2 domes outside the capital. She was sick. Couldn't access medical records anymore after the purge. Aaron used his clearance to get her help. Oscar stayed still. They killed him for that, she continued. Called it subversion. I didn't get to bury him. They took his body and erased his records from the birth circles. Our marriage was declared invalid. Retroactively. That's... You don't have to finish that sentence, she said. I've already thought of every word you might use. He swallowed hard. How did you escape? The night they came to our estate, I was with Tila in the lower quarters. Nerio was still being nursed by one of the house mothers. I heard the windows break first. Then the shouting. They dragged the staff out. Burned the seal of our house in the courtyard. Her voice was steady, but Oscar could feel the effort behind it. I took both children. We ran into the freight tunnels. Hid in a maintenance crate meant for food storage. No ventilation. No light. No sound. Just cold. How long? 3 days. Oscar didn't answer. He couldn't. They only found us because Nerio stopped crying. His body stopped producing enough fluid to make tears. The freight carrier's AI flagged the cargo as unresponsive mass. That's how the inspection team found us. Who helped you get here? Sarai hesitated. A human smuggler. Older woman. Scar above her left brow. She said she was ex-military, like you. She looked at me and said, "We don't leave mothers behind." Oscar blinked. That phrase. It was an old evac corps motto, one used by units that handled planetary collapse zones, places like Telmok. Do you remember her name? She said to forget it. Said names were for safe places. He nodded slowly. I paid her, Sarai added, with a signet ring. It was all I had left. Even stripped of its authority, it was platinum. She didn't haggle. They fell into silence again. The hum of the ventilation system filled the space between them. A warmth began to settle into Oscar's chest. It wasn't comfort. Not exactly. It was something heavier. A kind of gratitude that didn't yet have a name. And you? Sarai asked suddenly. You speak like a soldier, but you work like a doctor. What happened to you, Oscar? He looked down at his hands. The faint scars across his knuckles. The old burn that never quite faded along his wrist. I served in planetary rescue, he said. Was part of the Varn Medical Recon Unit, EMR-12. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. That name's known. You were deployed on Telmok. Yeah, that was a slaughter zone. It was supposed to be a clean extraction, but politics got involved. Orders changed. Civilians got left behind. And he exhaled. I didn't follow the order to pull out. I stayed to treat kids stuck in a collapsed magline tunnel. Saved 6. But command didn't like the deviation. They discharged you. Dishonorably. Revoked clearance. Banned me from private practice. Sent me here with a bunk, a ration slip, and a warning not to disrupt protocol. Sarai was quiet for a moment. Then she said, they punished you for being what they trained you to be. He met her gaze. Yeah, that's about right. She adjusted Tila's sleeping form gently, then turned her attention fully to Oscar. Then we have something in common. He tilted his head. What's that? We both carry children who shouldn't be alive. And we're both considered dangerous for making sure they are. A sharp breath caught in his throat. Not because of what she said, but because of how easily she said it. Like she was offering him a truth he hadn't dared give himself. I don't know what I'm doing, he admitted quietly. Not really. She nodded. Neither do I. But you're here. You too. Their eyes held for a long moment. Not charged. Not heavy. Just real. Shared. Then Nerio stirred again and let out a small cry. Before Sarai could reach him, Oscar stood, crouched, and gently placed a hand on the boy's back. His voice dropped into a hum, an old lullaby, half forgotten, words lost in the melody. Nerio whimpered once, then sighed and drifted back into sleep. When Oscar looked up, Sarai was watching him. Not guarded, not uncertain, but something closer to soft astonishment. What was that song? She asked. He shrugged. Don't know. My mother used to hum it. I think it was just something old and quiet. Sarai lowered her gaze. It worked. He sat back beside the wall. Then maybe I'll keep it around. A gentle quiet settled over the room again. But this time, it wasn't the silence of pain or waiting. It was the stillness of something beginning. Not a romance. Not yet. But the first moment where two people, battered and stripped down to instinct, finally saw each other. Not as threats, not as burdens, but as mirrors. And in that, there was something very close to peace. It began with laughter, not the brittle, forced kind that survival often breeds, but something brighter, more startling. It cut through the sterile quiet of the med bay, like a sunbeam breaking through storm glass. Oscar stirred awake, disoriented by the sound. For a split second, he thought he was dreaming. Then Nerio tumbled across his chest with a muffled squeal, dragging the blanket like a cape. "I'm a worm king," he shouted. Tila, half horrified, half amused, chased after him. "You can't be a worm king. Worms don't wear socks." "I do. I'm special." Nerio ducked under the table and cackled with delight. Oscar sat up, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "What in the 9 levels of vacuum is going on?" Tila looked at him with hands on her hips. "He stole my socks, duh. The warm ones." Oscar raised an eyebrow. "Well, sounds like the Royal Highness needs to return stolen property to the princess." "I'm not a princess," Tila said firmly. "I'm the Sky General." Oscar grinned. "Ah, well, carry on then." Sarai stood at the edge of the med bay, arms folded, watching it all with that unreadable expression of hers. Her hair was braided back, robe cinched neatly at the waist, but her posture had softened, barely, subtly, less like a shadow waiting to flee, more like a woman beginning to notice the shape of safety. Oscar met her gaze across the room. "I didn't know this place could sound like that." "Like what?" she asked. "Children being children." She tilted her head. "It's strange and loud. That's how you know it's good." Sarai looked at her children again. Nerio now crawling toward her on all fours, making monster noises. Tila had returned to her drawing, her stylus scratching lines of stars and domes, and, today, a strange mushroom-shaped tree. "They don't remember how to play properly," Sarai said, her voice quiet. "Not really. They were always taught to be still. Quiet, not to draw attention." Oscar nodded. "That's how you survived." "It's not how you live." He didn't reply. He didn't need to. He just watched them with her. Watched as Tila drew a planet with 4 stick figures under a blue sky. Not metal walls. Not ration cards. Not fences. "I want to show them something today," Sarai said suddenly. Oscar blinked. "Show them." She walked over to her pack, one of the few things she'd carried all the way from Uzia. She unwrapped a worn cloth bundle from inside, unfolding a small, round object that shimmered softly in the light. It looked like glass, but its core shifted in color as if it contained storm. Oscar stepped closer. "What is that?" "A memory globe," she said. "We use them to record family lines. History. Sacred stories. I've never shown them." "Why not?" "Because it's broken." The voice crystal inside shattered during the journey. There's no sound anymore. Just light. But maybe that's enough. She crouched and called the children over. Tila came first, curious. Nerio stumbled behind, still dragging the blanket like a royal train. Sarai placed the globe between them and pressed a finger to its center. It flickered to life, casting a soft lavender glow across the floor. Inside, a slow dance of shapes began to form. Figures. Symbols. The outline of a great tree growing upward into stars. A cradle. A child. 2 hands joined together. Tila leaned close, eyes wide. "Is this your planet?" Sarai nodded. Before it burned, Nerio reached out to touch the light. "Is it still there?" She hesitated. "Parts of it, but not like this." Oscar watched the way the children sat, so still now, so reverent, as the orb played out its silent story. "Why haven't you shown them before?" he asked. "Because I didn't want to promise them something they couldn't have again. But now," she looked up at him, "now I want them to remember that we come from something beautiful. Not just rubble." There was a long pause. Then Tila said, "Can we make our own story?" Sarai blinked. "What do you mean?" "In a globe. Like this. But with our story. With you. And me. And Nerio. And, Oscar felt something shift in his chest. Not pain. Not joy, even. Something more fundamental. Like a foundation being laid beneath his ribs. "You'd need a recorder crystal for that," he said, crouching beside her. "And probably a stabilizer. Do you have one?" He smiled. "Not yet, but I'll find one." Tila nodded, satisfied. "Okay, We'll wait. She went back to her drawing then, stylus flying with renewed energy. Nerio lay down beside her, watching the globe until his eyelids began to droop. Oscar stood and turned back to Sarai. "You're doing more than surviving," he said. "So are you." They stood close, not touching, but near enough that they could feel each other's presence. Later that evening, when the med bay fell quiet again and the children finally slept, Oscar sat by the terminal, idly scrolling through maintenance logs and ration summaries. But his mind wasn't on the numbers. It was on her. Sarai knelt nearby, folding the same worn cloth she'd wrapped the globe in. Her movements were careful, as always, but tonight there was something gentler in the way she moved. Something no longer shaped by fear. "You said the globe's voice was broken," he said quietly. She nodded. "Yes, I think we can fix that." She looked at him. "Ow!" He turned the chair to face her. With new voices. She smiled. Not a big smile, just the faintest curl at the edge of her lips. But stayed longer this time. That night, before the lights dimmed, Tila padded across the room, climbed into Oscar's lap without asking, and curled up like she belonged there. "You make the bad dreams smaller," she murmured. He wrapped his arms around her. "I'll keep doing that." "Promise?" He hesitated for just a moment, then said, "Yes, I promise." Across the room, Sarai watched him. Not with awe, not even with affection, with trust. Real, earned, quiet as the stars. And in the corner, the globe flickered once more, its silent story pulsing like a heartbeat. Not of what was lost, but of what was being built. Oscar wasn't sure what had woken him. Maybe it was the subtle shift in temperature from the failing vent, or the faint creak of the medbay's pressure seals settling. Or maybe it was instinct, the part of him trained to sense change, danger, or the quiet before something fell apart. But when he opened his eyes, it wasn't the camp he checked first. It was them. Nerio had curled into the crook of his arm at some point in the night, tiny fingers tangled in the fabric of Oscar's shirt. Tila was tucked beside her mother, limbs sprawled across the cot with the unself-conscious abandon only children possessed. Sarai, eyes closed but brow faintly furrowed, lay facing the wall, the slow rise and fall of her breath the only proof she was still asleep. Oscar exhaled silently, the warmth of Nerio's body anchoring him in a way he hadn't felt in years. Not since before Telmach. Not since the life he no longer let himself remember in full color. He didn't move. He just stayed there, breathing in the fragile stillness, until Nerio stirred and blinked sleepily up at him. He whispered, voice hoarse from sleep. "Why's your heart so loud?" Oscar blinked. "My what?" Nerio laid a small hand over Oscar's chest, palm pressed flat. "It goes boom, boom, boom. Like it's scared." Oscar swallowed, caught off guard by the child's innocent perception. "It's not scared," he said after a moment. "It's just full." "Of what?" "Of you." Nerio stared at him, serious as ever. "Is that a good thing?" "It's the best thing." Nerio gave a sleepy nod, then nestled closer, his breath slowing as he drifted back to sleep. Later, once the children were both fully under, Oscar slipped from the mat and quietly moved toward the medbay entrance. The lights were still dimmed for sleep cycle, but camp never truly rested. There was always movement, shuffling boots, distant voices, the metallic hiss of overworked regulators. Sarai stirred behind him. "You don't sleep long," she murmured, her voice still rough with sleep. "Habit." She sat up slowly, brushing a few strands of hair from her face. "You dream?" Oscar hesitated. "Sometimes." She studied him, something thoughtful in her gaze. "You hum when you wake, just before your eyes open." "I didn't know that. It sounds like morning, or maybe prayer." He looked down. "Maybe it's both." He crossed to the small wash station and activated the water. It dribbled out sluggishly. Port Thrino's rationed everything, even sanitation. Still, he cupped a handful and splashed his face, letting the chill ground him. Behind him, Sarai stood and stretched, her robe slipping from one shoulder before she drew it back around herself. The subtle motion wasn't meant to be anything, and yet Oscar found himself looking away out of respect, or perhaps discomfort. Not because of her body, but because of the quiet intimacy that had begun to live between them. Unspoken, unnamed, but real. "I've been thinking," he said finally, drying his hands on the edge of his shirt. "About options. About the purge." Sarai's face darkened. "Don't. No, listen. If they come again, and I'm not here, you need protection. And you think the system will protect us? I think I can." She crossed her arms, not in defiance, but restraint. "By doing what?" "Registering you. Officially. As part of my file." A long pause. "You mean as your wife?" "I mean as someone the system can't pull out of here without pulling me too. Call it whatever you want." "And what do you call it?" Oscar looked at her. "A shield. Nothing more. Unless you want more." She didn't answer. "Not right away. I spent most of my life being someone's something," she said at last. "A daughter. A wife. A disgrace. A possession. I never got to just be me." He nodded slowly. "Then you decide what this is. If it's a shield, fine. If it's more, I'll wait until you tell me." She studied him for a long time, not weighing the words, weighing him. Then, her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Do the children need to know?" "Not yet. Not until you're ready." She nodded once. "Then, we'll do it." Oscar felt something shift inside him. A quiet click. A realignment. Later that day, he submitted the forms. Quietly. Discreetly. No fanfare. He chose a time when Command's comm relay was focused on a brawl in the lower quarter, and he used the override code he hadn't touched since his first day on Threnos. The file processed. The status updated. Family unit linked. Medical priority elevated. Dependence 2 protected. He closed the screen and exhaled. It was done. When he returned to the med bay, the children were playing with an old stethoscope he'd salvaged from storage. Tila had it looped around her neck like a badge of office, holding the other end to Nerio's chest with exaggerated seriousness. "Heartbeat is loud," she declared. "He must be very alive." "I'm very alive," Nerio said proudly. "And I have teeth now." Tila looked up at Oscar. "Does being alive hurt sometimes?" Oscar paused, then crouched beside her. "Yeah, sometimes. Does it get better?" He hesitated again, then said, "It does. If someone stays with you long enough." Tila nodded. "Then I will stay." Nerio raised a hand. "Me too. Unless there are spiders. Then I will hide under the blankets." Oscar laughed, sudden and warm. Sarai watched him from the cot, her eyes softer than he'd ever seen. She didn't smile, not yet, but her lips parted like she was remembering how. That night, when the lights dimmed again and the vents hummed their lullaby of survival, Oscar lay awake, the warmth of the children pressed into either side of him. Sarai lay just across from him, not touching, but closer than ever before. They didn't speak. They didn't need to, because in the quiet, in the shared air and borrowed time, there was no longer just survival. There was belonging. And for now, that was everything. Oscar was used to silence. Not the kind that filled abandoned tunnels or blood-streaked outposts, but the kind that came after choices. The moment when a decision settled deep in your bones and the world seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see if you'd regret it. That was what this morning felt like. He stood at the far corner of the med bay, arms folded over his chest, staring down at the terminal screen. The glow of it cast soft light over his face, the text cold and sterile. Transfer approval, complete. Cohabitation registered, status, civil unit. Dependent minors, Tila, F, Nerio, M, Guardian Link, Varn, Oscar. No going back now. The door behind him hissed open. He didn't have to turn. He knew who it was by the quiet way she stepped, the measured rhythm of her breath. Sarai moved like someone still half expecting the world to fall apart beneath her. She said nothing at first. Instead, she walked to the center of the room and stopped by the cot where Nerio was curled in sleep, blanket pulled to his chin, one arm draped across the stuffed cloth pouch Tila had declared his star pillow. A faint smile tugged at the boy's lips. He dreamed easily these days. That, Oscar thought, was a miracle on its own. When Sarai finally spoke, her voice was soft, but not hesitant. "You filed it." "I did." He turned slowly, meeting her gaze. There was no accusation in her eyes, only truth, and the quiet weight of what they'd chosen. You weren't supposed to do it alone, she said. I wasn't sure you'd say yes if I waited too long. She came closer, step steady now. Not challenging, not afraid. And if I'd said no, I would have avoided it. I didn't do it to trap you. Sarai considered that for a moment. Then she surprised him. I would have said yes, she said. He blinked. I would have said yes, she repeated, because I'm tired of living in the spaces between systems. Tired of waiting to be erased. She stepped closer until they were only a breath apart. Do you understand what you've done, Oscar? She asked. What it means to put my name next to yours. In a system that never even considered me real. He nodded. I do. And I don't care how many rules it breaks. She laughed, a dry sound. Then you've made the first real mistake I respect. From the cot, a small voice stirred. Duh. Oscar turned. Tila sat up, rubbing her eyes, silver hair sticking to one cheek. You're talking again. Oscar moved toward her. We never stopped. Tila looked between the two adults, still half asleep. Are we going away now? Oscar crouched beside her. Yes. Not yet, but soon. I found a way to leave. Together? He nodded. Always together. Tila blinked slowly. Will the stars be bigger where we go? I think they'll look different, he said. But I'll still point them out. She smiled, then frowned. Do I have to learn a new language again? No, Sarai said, walking over. This time, the world will have to learn yours. Tila seemed to consider this as a fair bargain, then flopped back down. Okay, but I'm not packing today. Deal, Oscar said. He watched her drift off again before rising. Sarai hadn't moved. Her gaze lingered on Tila's sleeping face, the calm of it. The way she didn't flinch at sound anymore. How she slept openly, trustingly. That wasn't possible on Uzia, she murmured. Children didn't fall asleep in safety. They collapsed from exhaustion. Oscar didn't respond. He simply stood beside her, quiet, present. She reached out and touched his hand. Not a brush, not an accident. This time, she chose contact. Her fingers found his and stayed there. I need to ask you something, she said, her voice low. Anything. If we go, if we really leave this station, what happens when it gets hard again? When someone tells you we don't belong, or the rules shift, or the colony decides we're not convenient. Then we fight, Oscar said. Not with guns, with papers, with presence, with truth. And if all that fails, we leave again. But we do it together. Sarai's grip tightened slightly. I'm not used to being someone people fight for. Then let this be your first time. She took a long breath, then slowly released it. And what are we calling this? Partnership. Oscar looked at her. You tell me. She thought for a moment, then said, I think I'd like to call it peace. He exhaled. That works. That evening, he took the children to the upper deck, where a long-forgotten viewport overlooked the orbital horizon. Few came here anymore. The seal was slightly warped, and the oxygen sensors glitched if the door was opened too quickly. But Oscar had bypassed the alert system weeks ago. He sat on the floor with Nario in his lap, Tila leaning against his shoulder. Sarai stood just behind them, arms crossed but expression soft. See that? Oscar pointed to a dim cluster of stars. That one's Elian, the one we're heading to. Tila narrowed her eyes. Looks like a sleepy eye, or a half-squished jelly fruit. Nario added helpfully. Oscar chuckled. Both good guesses. Sarai stepped forward and knelt beside them. In Uzian tradition, she said, a new star meant someone had told the truth. The brighter it burned, the deeper the truth it carried. Then that one must be burning because of you and, Tila said with conviction. Oscar looked at Sarai. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Later, after the children were asleep and the corridor lights dimmed, Oscar sat beside her on the cot. They didn't talk about the transfer document anymore. They didn't need to. Sarai's hand found his again in the dark, steady and warm. You know, she said softly, I thought I was offering myself to survive. You were. But now I think I might be offering something else. Oscar turned to her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. What? My future. And in the stillness of that moment, for the first time since either of them had lost everything, they believed it might actually be safe to hope. Together. The sky on Elian 3 was wrong. It wasn't blue. Not the way Earth had been, nor even the dull, tinted skies of terraformed colonies. It was soft lavender at the edges, deepening into a dusky rose above. Like a bruise in bloom. Like something healing. Oscar stood on the landing ramp and stared. Behind him, the transport hissed shut. The airlock sealed. No turning back now. They had arrived. He heard Tila gasp, soft but sharp, like a breath caught between fear and awe. She stood beside him, silver-white hair blowing gently in a breeze that didn't feel recycled. Her small fingers wrapped around his sleeve. It smells, she hesitated, brow furrowed. It smells like green. He smiled. Yeah, like wet leaves. Nerio peeked out from behind Soray's leg, wide-eyed. Is this outside? This is real outside, Oscar said. No walls. No domes. The children stared in stunned silence, adjusting to a concept they'd never truly lived. Open space. Air that moved of its own will. Soil that wasn't imported by shuttle crate. Saray remained a step behind them. She hadn't spoken since they disembarked. Her arms were tight across her chest, her shoulders held taut beneath her shawl. Her eyes didn't move to the sky, or the hills, or even the soft purple trees lining the transport pad. Instead, she kept her gaze fixed low, on the path, on where to place her feet. Oscar understood. Hope was heavier than fear when you'd carried the ladder for years. He turned toward the admin checkpoint. A man in colony gray, mid-40s, lean, with a sunburn peeling across his neck, greeted them with a bored look. Registration? The man asked. Oscar handed over the pad. Family unit transfer. Var and Oscar, accompanied by partner and dependents. The man scanned it. Sector 12. 4-person module. Fully sealed. Not bad for new arrivals. You got lucky. Oscar said nothing. He didn't believe in luck. Just choices. And the bruises that came from making them. The man handed the pad back. Orientation briefings tomorrow. Don't miss it, or they fine you in food credits. And don't go near the riverbanks after dusk. The wildlife's still adjusting to the climate. Oscar nodded. Understood. They followed the dirt path away from the landing site. Real dirt, loose and soft, not packed down alloy floors. It clung to the soles of their boots, turned the hem of Tila's tunic a soft gray. The wind stirred again, brushing against their skin like a living thing. Saray walked stiffly, eyes flicking at every sound. She kept one hand on Nerio's shoulder, the other free near her hip, as if expecting to be pulled aside at any moment, told it was all a mistake. Oscar slowed his pace until he was beside her. You're not walking into a trap, he said quietly. I know, she replied. But you don't believe it yet. No, she admitted. Not yet. They reached the shelter 10 minutes later, a dome of pale metal and reinforced polymer, nestled at the base of a low ridge. One solar panel blinked green. The biometric scanner on the door hummed when Oscar touched it. Inside, the space was simple, functional. 4 cots, a folding table, a meal unit, a sanitation stall, and most miraculous of all, windows. 3 of them, wide and curved, looking out toward the hills. Light spilled in. Natural light. Nerio ran to the far wall and pressed both hands against the glass. It's warm. Tila climbed onto one of the beds and bounced once. Then stopped. Is it ours? Oscar nodded. All ours. She lay back slowly, arms stretched, as if daring the ceiling to fall. It didn't. Saray walked in last. She said nothing, just stood in the center of the room, head tilted upward. After a long silence, she spoke. There's no echo. Oscar raised an eyebrow. What? In every room I've lived in, there was an echo. The space was too cold, too hard. Here it's quiet, but it doesn't feel empty. He didn't respond. He didn't need to. Instead, he walked over to the supply crate at the base of the bunks and opened it. Inside were folded linens, nutrient packs, and 2 worn children's books translated into standard. He tossed a pack to Saray. Enough for a few days. Water tanks full. We can plant a small plot behind the ridge once we're cleared. She caught the packet easily. You planned all this. I plan a lot of things, he said. This one worked. That night, they ate together on the floor. No plates, just ration packs and a shared bowl of warm grain. Tila fed Nerio, even though he insisted he could do it himself. He spilled half down his shirt anyway. Do you think this place has bugs? He asked, licking his fingers. Most definitely, Oscar said. Can we name them? Only if you promise not to eat them. Sarai smiled quietly as she sipped her tea. She had brewed it from a pouch labeled Mint Analog Number 4, and despite the name, it tasted of something real. After dinner, Tila returned to the window and stared at the stars. They look different, she said. They are, Oscar replied. Can I draw new ones? As many as you want. She looked at him. Can we stay here forever? Oscar hesitated, then nodded. As long as it's safe. And if it's not? He looked over at Sarai. If it's not, she said, then we'll carry the stars with us. Later, when the children had fallen asleep, Tila curled at the edge of the cot, Nerio buried under his blanket. Oscar stood by the window, arms folded. Sarai came up beside him. I didn't think it would feel this strange, she said. What part? Breathing without bracing for impact. He turned slightly toward her. We've still got work ahead. Building a garden, settling in, learning the land. You ready for all that? She didn't smile, but her eyes brightened. I think I want to be. Outside, the lavender sky darkened. Distant hills cast long shadows. The air was still, heavy with moisture, fragrant with the scent of soil and alien flora. And for the first time in longer than either of them could remember, the night didn't feel like something to survive. It felt like something to rest in, to dream in, to begin. The stars were different here. Oscar noticed it first, staring through the viewport as the colony transport descended toward Elian 3. The system's sun glowed amber, smaller than Earth's but steadier. The atmosphere shimmered faintly around the planet's curve, and below that, real land. Not titanium walkways or synth metal slabs. Soil, grass, trees in the distance, sparse and pale blue under the filtered light. Wind that moved freely across open spaces. Not manufactured, not rationed. Alive. He hadn't realized how quiet his heart had become until it began to beat again with hope. The ship's landing struts touched down with a soft hydraulic sigh, and Oscar unfastened the children's belts with practiced hands. Tila jumped down first, clutching her worn satchel with the same seriousness a soldier might carry a rifle. Nerio followed, dragging his feet until Oscar bent down and whispered, Think you'll find any Worm Kings out there? Nerio's face lit up. I'll be their prince. Sarai stood beside him, her fingers tightening briefly around Oscar's before she let go. She didn't need to speak. Her expression carried the mix of wonder and skepticism they were both feeling. Trusting in anything still felt like walking a beam over open sky. They exited the ship as a group, unified, unnamed, and whole. The colony's intake platform greeted them with a faint scent of ozone and tilled soil. A breeze moved across the plains, stirring Tila's hair and tugging at the hem of Sarai's robe. Nerio froze and whispered, What's that? Wind, Oscar answered. The real kind. It tickles, Nerio declared, laughing. They passed through the checkpoint with minimal scans. Elian 3 wasn't a high-security world. Not yet. Just a hopeful one. That was its danger, and its promise. An admin officer handed Oscar a datapad. Unit Varn, assigned to Sector 12. Shelter module already powered. Basic supplies inside. Orientation briefing in 3 days. Until then, explore, rest, settle. Oscar took the pad and nodded. Thanks. The man looked at the children. They yours. Oscar glanced back at Tila and Nerio. Nerio was running in lopsided circles. Tila was trying to catch the wind in her hands. He smiled. They're ours. They followed the dirt path. Dirt, not alloy plating, toward their module. The prefab shelter was simple, a curved dome tucked at the base of a gentle hill, surrounded by thin blue-leaved trees. It hummed softly as the biometric lock registered Oscar's print and slid open. Inside, light, space, warmth. Not much, but enough. There were 4 bunks, a food prep station, a working water tap, and windows, clear, curved panels that looked out over the fields instead of inward like every wall on Port Threnos. Tila dropped her bag on one of the beds and spun in place. It smells like plants. Nerio crawled under the table and declared it his fortress. Sarai stood just inside the doorway. her gaze sweeping the room as if waiting for something to be wrong. Oscar stepped behind her and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You okay?" She didn't answer right away. Then, "I don't remember what it feels like to sleep without checking the exits." "You don't have it tonight." "I know. That's what frightens me." He didn't try to fix that feeling. Some things weren't wounds. They were scars that needed time. That night, as the artificial sun dipped below the low hills outside their dome, they sat together on the floor with bowls of protein stew, freshly heated and flavored with something earthy and unfamiliar. Tila asked questions between bites. "Will I have to go to school here? What do they teach? Are the stars different on this planet? Can I plant something?" Sarai answered softly, her voice steady and maternal in a way Oscar had grown to cherish. "They teach you things that help you grow, like soil for your mind. And if my brain grows too big, will I float?" Tila asked. Oscar grinned. "That's the dream, kid." Nerio slurped his stew and added, "Can we make a garden?" "Maybe," Oscar said. "There's space behind the shelter. And real dirt." Tila gasped. "We can grow a real starflower. If you find seeds, I'll find them. I'll ask the wind." After dinner, Sarai stepped outside to walk. Oscar let her go. He cleaned up, helped Nerio settle in a bed, then sat with Tila while she sketched. New stars, new skies, the dome shelter drawn with windows wide open. When Sarai returned, her braid was looser and her steps were quieter. She stood at the doorway, watching them. Oscar looked up. "You walked far." "Just enough." "Find anything?" She hesitated, then said, "Yes." She crossed the room and sat beside him on the floor. "There was a tree," she said. "It had roots thick as my arms. It grew straight up through a patch of glassy rock. Like it didn't care the world, try to break it. Sounds like someone I know." She smiled faintly. "I'm still learning how to be someone." "You're doing fine." She leaned her head against his shoulder, silent. Her hand found his. "Do you think they'll remember this?" she whispered. "Tila and Nerio." She nodded. "Yeah, they'll remember this as the place they got to begin. And us." He looked down at their joined hands. "I think we're already something they believe in." That night, after the children had fallen into soft, dreamless sleep and the wind outside hummed gently across the Elian 3 fields, Sarai stood at the threshold of the sleeping quarters. She held herself with that same quiet poise she always carried, but tonight it felt different, less guarded, as if her stillness was not born of fear, but of decision. Oscar was sitting on the edge of his bunk, one arm draped across his knee, watching the slow flicker of the night light above the door. The pale glow painted soft shadows across his face, bringing out the quiet in his eyes. Sarai spoke first, her voice hushed but steady. "I can't sleep alone tonight." Oscar looked up, surprised, but not startled. He nodded once and stood, stepping aside. The bed wasn't large, barely wide enough for 2 people, but it held warmth from where he'd been sitting. She approached, barefoot, her steps light on the laminate floor. Her silver-white braid had loosened, falling across one shoulder like a ribbon of starlight. Her violet-toned skin shimmered faintly in the soft light, like dusk painted in flesh. She lay down beside him without a word, facing the wall at first, her back to him. He lay down, slowly, giving her space. But after a long silence, she whispered, "I don't want space." He turned gently, facing her back. "Then I'm here." She shifted closer, her shoulders touching his chest. His arm moved around her, not gripping, not claiming, just there. A presence. A promise. Her body slowly relaxed against his. For a while, they didn't speak. They just breathed in rhythm, the way people do when their hearts are close and unarmored. Her skin was warm against him. Her scent like crushed leaves and something clean filled his senses. He felt her fingertips trace lightly across his hand, searching for something. He met them with his own. When she finally turned to face him, their eyes met in the quiet. She reached up and brushed his cheek with the back of her fingers, her thumb hovering just under his jaw. "I've never said this to anyone," she whispered. Oscar swallowed, watching her. She drew in a breath, steady but full of weight. "I love you." Oscar didn't answer with words, not right away. He looked at her, and it was as if the entire war-torn history of both their lives had led here. not to tragedy, but to this singular, quiet miracle of understanding. He leaned forward, slow, deliberate, and kissed her. It wasn't urgent. It wasn't rushed. It was soft and real, like two people finally allowing themselves to fall into the gravity they'd spent so long resisting. Her lips trembled under his at first, then deepened, anchoring herself in the feel of him, the warmth of his hands, the safety of being seen and still chosen. When the kiss broke, he rested his forehead against hers. "I love you too," he said. She smiled, fully this time. Unmasked. "Say it again." "I love you." Her eyes closed. Once more, he kissed her again before answering. "I love you." She exhaled a breath that sounded like surrender. Not to him, but to peace. And when they finally fell asleep, still wrapped in each other's arms, neither of them stirred at the sound of the wind pressing softly against the windows. For the first time in their lives, they weren't surviving a night. They were living one, together.